Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all who are joining to this webinar from different parts of the world. Today is the 53rd World Environment Day since its establishment by the United Nations General Assembly. During the last 52 years, global campaigns brought together governments, business, celebrities, and citizens to focus on important environmental issues. The theme of this year's World Environment Day asks for urgent climate action, and we are observing this important day by paying attention on the water issues. Water is one of the most important issues that is being impacted by the change in the climatic processes. And it has been reported by the scientists and global institutions aiming to draw attention of the governments to take actions for addressing related challenges. The recent report entitled Global Water Bankruptcy, published by the United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment and Health, that we are already living in a water bankrupt condition, which is beyond the fix by our hydrological means. It also indicated that we are living in the post crisis era without resolving the crisis. The report mentioned that water insecurity is a systemic global risk. Addressing water crisis depends on understanding the problems in the first place. Today in my presentation, I'll present how complicated the water problems are by presenting a case study on Bengal Delta, where I used historical analysis, satellite data, and my personal experience as a Delta dweller. I'll talk about the rivers, as rivers are the vital water supply sources to meet various needs. I will show how river morphological conditions have been changed due to human induced actions, especially during the colonial and post colonial periods over the decades. Using satellite data, I will show how over extraction of water from groundwater tables has made the whole water scenario complicated and irreversible. In most of the cases, we don't take these historical impact legacies in understanding the current conditions, and also we lack necessary data at appropriate scale to fathom the crisis. Based on these facts, I have titled this presentation as History, Epistemic Crisis and Path to Water Security in a Warming World. At the outset, I would like to present some basic facts on the water issues of the world. The total length of rivers of the world is about 25 million kilometers with annual water flow 110,000 kilometer cube per year. And 63% of long rivers are not free flowing now. These rivers have been degraded due to natural sediment deposition, log jams, water mills, low head infrastructure, hard river engineering interventions like dam construction and river fragmentation. Local microclimatic conditions, recharging local aquifers, supply of protein-based foods by different means are some of the functions that small rivers perform for the local communities. But we do not have adequate data on the small rivers. We have river databases like HydroSheds, Hydro 1K. These provide information for large size watershed areas. Water is a dynamic environmental element and its movement depends on water mass, energy, and land morphological attributes like relief and elevation, downward slope, soil condition that determines the sediment supply. We need to understand all these as an integrated systemic process. This slide on the Bengal Basin shows that the water aspects of Bengal Delta as an integrated system, where the Himalayas and surrounding highlands supply water and sediment through the Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Meghna rivers. It also shows that the delta formation occurred in phases over thousands of years. The first delta fan was developed about 7.5 thousand years back. The mighty Himalayan mountain range, that is about 7 kilometers high on an average, supply water from a vast 2 million square kilometers of watershed regions and forced to pass through this water mass through Bangladesh that is only 144,000 square kilometers in size. Understanding today's delta changes such as flooding, erosion, land subsidence requires studying these entire connected systems, not fragmented parts. But we are not doing that. This slide presents the major disasters that have affected the rivers of Bengal Delta over the last 400 years, alongside the various physical interventions that have been introduced into the river system during this period. This slide highlights the Water Sector Master Plan proposed in 1964 by a United States consulting firm named IECO. The plan advocated the construction of embankments along rivers to protect floodplains from seasonal flooding. However, this approach failed to recognize that seasonal inundation and sediment deposition are integral components of a healthy deltaic system. The Bengal Delta receives approximately 1 trillion cubic meters of water and 1.5 billion tons of sediment annually. This continuous influx of water and sediment plays a critical role in sustaining delta formation, maintaining land elevation, replenishing floodplains, and supporting the long term resilience of the deltaic system. By preventing floodwaters from reaching the floodplains, the embankment strategy disrupted one of the delta's fundamental natural processes. In effect, it undermined the very mechanisms through which the delta sustains itself. This slide shows the dry season riverbed of the Ganges River, illustrating the enormous sediment load carried by the river. Yet the master plan provided no effective strategy for managing these sediments or preventing river channels from gradually becoming clogged and shallower over time. Under natural conditions, sediments are distributed across extensive floodplain areas during seasonal floods, when rivers overtop their banks. This process allows riverbeds to remain sufficiently deep to convey water while simultaneously raising the elevation of floodplains, thereby creating and maintaining land suitable for human habitation and agricultural production. I recently conducted bathymetric surveys in three coastal rivers of Bangladesh and found that two of them had accumulated substantial volumes of sediment within their riverbeds. This slide illustrates how these rivers have undergone significant and, in many cases, nearly irreversible morphological changes. As a result, their carrying capacity has been greatly reduced, and in some locations, riverbeds have risen to elevations comparable to adjacent floodplains, severely restricting water flow. Consequently, the continuous removal of sediment through dredging, which is very expensive, has become a common practice in efforts to keep Bangladesh rivers navigable and hydraulically functional. This slide presents an interesting example of community led adaptation. In the southwestern region of Bangladesh, local communities suffering from prolonged waterlogging caused by structural flood protection measures deliberately breached embankments to allow sediment laden floodwaters to re enter the floodplain. According to the study presented here, approximately 50 centimeters of land elevation were gained through natural sediment deposition under embankment free conditions. As a result, large waterlogged areas were reclaimed and restored by local communities. This example demonstrates the importance of working with natural deltaic processes rather than attempting to control or suppress them. This slide compares historical and contemporary river conditions. Historical maps show that the headwaters of five southwestern coastal rivers were directly connected to upstream river systems and received regular flows of water and sediment. In contrast, satellite imagery from 2024 reveals that many of these rivers have become disconnected from their parent channels due to extensive morphological changes within the deltaic landscape. These findings highlight the profound transformations that have occurred in the Bengal Delta over time and underscore the importance of understanding rivers as dynamic components of a larger socio ecological system. The next set of slides presents evidence of groundwater depletion across the Bengal Delta region. To examine the status and long-term dynamics of groundwater resources, I used data from GRACE and GRACE follow-on satellite missions covering the period from 2002 to 2025. These maps illustrate seasonal variations in groundwater storage during both summer and winter. These findings indicate that groundwater depletion has accelerated significantly in recent years. The average annual depletion rate during 2018 to 2025 was approximately 44.4% higher than the observed during 2002 to 2017. Considering together the changes in the river morphology, alterations in surface water availability, and accelerating groundwater depletion reveal a profound system level transformation of Bengal Delta. Historically, the Bengal Delta was often categorized into distinct geomorphological zones like mature, moribund, and young delta regions. Today, however, these distinctions are becoming increasingly blurred as systemic environmental changes reshape the delta as a whole. Morphological, fluvial, and hydrological processes that once operated across different temporal scales ranging from annual and decadal cycles to century and millennial timescales, are no longer functioning in the ways they historically did. As a consequence, the Bengal Delta is gradually losing many of its natural deltaic characteristics. The implications are profound. Environmental degradation at the system level is increasingly translating into social challenges, including food insecurity, water scarcity, public health concerns, and livelihood vulnerabilities for millions of people living across the delta. This slide illustrates how a systems thinking perspective helps us understand these local sufferings as outcomes of broader systemic disruptions rather than isolated environmental events. The next slide summarizes these findings through what I call the Bengal Delta paradox, a situation in which significant investments and interventions often failed to enhance either water security or community resilience. Drawing upon both scientific evidence and my own reflexive experience as a Delta dweller, I propose a conceptual pathway toward water security in the Bengal Delta regions under conditions of climate change and environmental uncertainty. I call this framework delta centrism. Delta centrism places the delta itself at the center of analysis, governance, and adaptation. Rather than treating the delta as merely a physical setting for human activities, it views the delta as a dynamic and evolving socio-ecological system whose integrity must be maintained if long-term resilience is to be achieved. It advocates a data driven understanding of deltaic processes and emphasizes the importance of diagnosing problems through robust evidence while uncovering the underlying mechanisms that generate those problems. Such an approach can support more effective intersectoral coordination and the development of adaptive pathways for sustainable water governance. This slide presents an example involving abandoned or dead river channels. From a delta-centric perspective, these areas should be assessed according to their geomorphological, hydrological, and ecological characteristics before interventions are undertaken. Any intervention that ignores the natural integrity of the local system risks creating additional environmental and social problems. For example, excavating these paleochannels may not necessarily restore active river flow. However, such areas could still provide substantial benefits to the local communities if they are transformed into wetlands or lakes or multifunctional water retention systems. Because these abandoned channels are located in the lowest elevations in the landscape, groundwater resources frequently remain available beneath them, creating opportunities for alternative forms of ecological restoration and productive use. Throughout the presentation, I have argued that our understanding of water systems, rivers, and related environmental processes remains incomplete. This concern is also reflected in recent publications in Nature, which highlight the persistent underassessment of environmental risks in developing countries such as Bangladesh. Another recent Nature study suggests that some of climate related impacts, including sea level rise, may be significantly more severe than previously understood. Furthermore, large-scale climate oscillations and teleconnections, including ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation, North Atlantic Oscillation, Madden-Julian Oscillation, Arctic Oscillation, the Indian Ocean Dipole, the Indian Ocean Wormhole are likely to introduce additional uncertainties and amplify future impacts across the region. Taken together, these findings suggest that future water challenges may become even more severe unless decisive action is taken. At the global level, we need to embrace an earth stewardship approach, one that shifts society away from exclusive pursuit of material growth toward the sustainable management of built natural, human, and social capital. At the local level, citizen science initiatives can play important roles. Walking along the rivers and documenting water flow challenges can generate valuable information for understanding river conditions and identifying opportunities for restoration. Such efforts can contribute not only to restoring ecological functions but also to reconstructing historical narratives of river and water landscapes, much of which remains fragmented, undocumented, or overlooked. Finally, I would like to emphasize that scientists are fulfilling their responsibility by documenting changing water vis-a-vis environmental conditions, developing projections, and constructing future scenarios. What is now needed is a strong political commitment and collective action. Recognizing water security as a global priority is no longer optional. It is essential. Thank you.